Hello and you're welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler, in association with Square. Square helps you look after your business needs, from payments to menu management and online ordering. Visit square.com for more. Now, last week we debated whether artificial intelligence could be dangerous and whether it should be paused for 6 months. We got quite a lot of listener feedback to that, with some alternative views to the ones that I was expressing. Aisling Mackey, a listener, summed up a few of them with this comment.
The thing about, say, neural networks, it's so different to structured programming, where structured programming is the traditional programming, where it's all based on if X equals 10, then do this, while Y equals on, keep doing this other task. So it's very deterministic. It's very much, kind of what's happening within the programs. And even in that situation, we'll still miss edge cases. We always do. But with neural networks, you don't know what's going on within the programs. The nature of the beast is really different. So you can't predict the outcomes.
You can't predict the outcomes. What do you make of that?
I think it's a very fair point, and I think Aisling is 100% correct, and I stand by my views 100% all the same. If any of the rest of you have other views on this, please do let us know. We will feed them back. Now, when we think of artificial intelligence, really the one that most people are talking about is Chat GPT. But how many of us have actually tried using Chat GPT in our everyday lives? How many listeners have done so? If so, how have you tried to do it? If you haven't, today we're going to give you specific examples of what you can use it for, in what situations, and where it's handiest. Tabitha Monahan, other than playing around with it, which I know you have you really used it for anything in your everyday life?
Not yet, because I think I'm still questioning whether we should be doing it or not. Especially within our job. Do I want ChatGPT to be influencing the stuff that I'm writing or producing or whatever? So it is still very much in the experimental phase for me. I don't know, what about you?
I'm definitely using it at the moment, and I'm going to reference that in a couple of the examples that we talk about. It's actually quite handy in the job that I do, because I don't just write, but I also edit, and then I have to frame stuff and I have to come up with proposals, and we'll talk about how it's good as a structure to give you ideas and inspiration. In fact, sometimes you put so much effort into the prompts that you end up writing the thing before ChatGPT gets back to you. But just before we start, I'm going to, a word here for the absolute beginners to ChatGPT in how you literally set it up and go about it. So you have to go to chat.openai.com. You can Google this. It will come up with the website. You have to create a free account. That free account may not always give you service at the time when it's busiest, in other words, when the Americans come online and decide to use it, in which case you'll need to open what's called a Plus account, and that'll cost you $20, which is about €18
so
a month.
It'll be slow.
It will be slow, and sometimes it won't let you use it if everybody's trying to use it.
I did find that last night.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. The other thing you should know the limitations to the service, which we will go into in detail a little bit later on. But once that is done, you will see a prompt box, like in Google, a little rectangular box that you type into at the bottom, and that's where you enter a command, a question, a challenge, or whatever else you want to do in that text box. You'll get a response, and then afterwards you can ask for a variation of that. A couple of things to bear in mind: the more information and the more detail you give it, the better. Also, this is not a search engine. It will not reach into the web to look for stuff. This is what they call a large language model. It's a giant bucket of data that they have kind of sequestered off, and it's reaching into that and trying to find patterns within that information. So it's not going to Google, it's not going to the independent.ie for your answers. So you just know about
that beyond 2021, it really won't know any current events.
That's right, unless you feed into it yourself specific information.
And that is a skill in itself, is creating the correct prompts to get the response that you want, or a decent response.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, onto the examples, because I think that's why most people have tuned in to this. So the first one we've picked is one that I find incredibly useful in a number of ways, and that is to summarize large amounts of text. Have you tried doing this?
Not yet.
Okay, so there are a couple of ways that I found it very, very useful. The first one is to make a readable summary of a very large document. So let's say you've been given a report, a summary, an annual report, something like that. And what we all do is we usually go to the executive summary and we read the 5 paragraphs. But there's usually a lot more that you should read. So if you literally copy and paste that text and put it into the prompt and say, give me 10 takeaways from this, or 10 points, or give me a 300-word summary of this entire document, it will do that. Now, when I say put it in as a prompt, this is the language I'm talking about. Use this exact language. Summarize this text in 10 points, and then paste the copy text in. When you get that back, you can, if you want it to be simpler English, for example, you can say, now limit the individual points to 8 words each. If you want simple English.
You really have to hold its hand.
You have to hold its hand, and remember, it will remember what you have asked it to do before. So you don't have to type out the entire prompt again with all of the variations. You can say things like, now prioritize the points that deal with money or profitability, and it will do that.
So it really is tailoring it as a tool to you as a user.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Now, the second one, and this is where it gets more into the alchemy, where it becomes really impressive. You can ask it to make a summary or a report out of a bunch of bullet points or a company list, either that you feed into it or something you found. So that could be very, very useful. For example, if you have, say, a profit and loss data sheet, this would typically be at work, and you want to create a summary of a very large set of accounts, it will do that. It will also make very, very interesting summary articles out of lists you find online. So I went, for example, to Wikipedia and I asked it for the list of the richest people in Ireland. It gives me a list of the richest people in Ireland. It gives me the name, what they're worth, and 1 or 2 other bits of information in a list. I literally copy and paste it. I literally put it into Chat GPT, and it comes back to me with a really competent, fleshed out article summary of who they are and what they do as well, and what their background and history is. Don't forget, it's using its own information database
up until 2021.
Up until 2021, in which there will have been a lot of mention of those people. That is a really, really useful. And the third way of summarizing, I think, which is really also useful, is to critically analyze your own work. Let's say you yourself have written a presentation, a big document, something you want to share with people. It could be socially, it could be professionally. You can feed all that into ChatGPT, and you can ask it to critically assess that work in any way. You can say, something like, I wanted this text to particularly emphasize, for example, productivity or anything else. Does it succeed in doing this? It will give you a response, and then you can ask it to improve the text. You can say, if I wanted to emphasize X and Y, what should I add to this text to do it? Now, I've done this with a few things, and it will come back and it'll tell me, you need, on this subject, more examples.
Okay.
That's quite useful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that an editor would normally tell you. So I'm assuming the people who are listening to this are not journalists and not editors. And that's a very, very useful way that ChatGPT can help you improve or summarize or speed up stuff that you're preparing anyway.
Is there a word limit to the text that you can enter to summarize?
There is, but I haven't actually, the examples that I've picked, I haven't actually broken it yet. So I've inputted 2,000-3,000 words. Pieces of text into it.
So that's a good example of how people might use it for work.
Yep.
But let's say outside of work, a good one that we have been testing out, have been using, is to explain a difficult concept. Mm-hmm. So something that I tried myself was explaining the offside rule as if I was 5 years old. For now, because
did you understand it afterwards?
Yeah, I do now. Okay. Yeah, but I had to get Adrian. I am not going to indulge in that. But explaining what the Good Friday Agreement is, for example, because of the week that's in it. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to explain to me what the Good Friday Agreement is in 100 words.
Yeah.
as if I'm 5 years old.
5 is a pretty low age, I'll say.
Yeah, but if you really,
10 or 12.
Okay, but if you're wanting to just understand it really quick, so this is what it's given me. The Good Friday Agreement is like a promise that people in Northern Ireland made to each other to be kind and peaceful. They said they would stop fighting and hurting each other and work together to be friends. It's like when you make a promise to your friend that you won't be mean and you'll share your toys. It's a really important promise that has helped people in Northern Ireland to have a better life and live in peace. Now, probably you're right. 5 years old was probably a little bit too young.
It's a little bit basic, but the point is that you're making is that it will tailor the language, the tone, the complexity of the topics and the issues to what it understands the pattern of a normal 5-year-old's comprehension will be. And it will do the same if you're 8 years old, 12 years old, 21 years old. It's interesting when you go the other end of the spectrum. I've tried a few, like I'm 95 years old.
Oh, okay.
And it can be a little bit patronizing.
Oh.
It uses frames like reassuring and comfortable and not complicated and things like that all the time. But they're the patterns that it is picking up in the data set it has. So it's a very good way of doing it. In science as well, you can do things like explain a supernova to me like I'm 10 years of age. So that's a very good one, explaining a difficult concept. Another one I think is interesting is helping you to generate ideas. So this is of a lot of help to writers. It's a huge help actually in the marketing business, but also for small businesses. So it's very, very good at coming up with both marketing and creative copy, things like headlines and slogans. So if you put in something like suggest 10 advertising slogans for my coffee company that are witty and suitable for somebody between the age of 21 and 35, it will come back to you with 10 pretty good, in my experience, advertising slogans. Then you can say, now limit the slogan to 6 words if you want something snappy. Then you can say, now limit it to a style that will be appropriate to TikTok. And the possibilities are absolutely endless there. You can also ask it to adjust for tone and style and everything else. So it's very, very good for helping to generate ideas. The only thing is for writers, and I tried this myself, I was tinkering around with plots and plays and things like that. You spend so much time and effort actually crafting the prompt that you end up kind of writing your own narrative or dialogue anyway yourself. So, but that's in itself is actually quite a help. It's like a little exercise. Okay, let's go on to emails.
Emails.
Yes.
This is something that I think ChatGPT is really good for, is giving you a starting point for something that you really don't want to do. I think when you sit down to write a difficult email, whether it's a complaint to HR or if it's an email that you've just been dreading to write, but you know you have to write, it's a great way of starting off. You know, when you're sitting there and it's a blank Word document or whatever you're using, and it's just getting that first sentence on the page can be really difficult. You're under pressure. You're a bit wound up over it in general. If it's a complaint to HR, for example, you can stick that into ChatGPT and it will give you a really good example of where you can go with it. And you know that phrase, it's better to be a critic, or it's easier to be a critic. That's exactly what you're going to do with this. It will serve you an answer and you're going to say, well, I don't like that, but actually I like this bit. And then the ball rolls and it's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried 1 or 2 examples of those and I was quite impressed with what it came back with. You can also adjust it to be a more casual style or a more formal style, to be a more challenging style, an angrier style, a more sorrowful style.
If you struggle to be assertive, you can tell it to be assertive and it'll tell you this is how it's meant to be. It's great. It's so useful for people who struggle with that.
Okay. Another work-related one is a cover letter and a CV.
Again,
or a resume, as the Americans
really
call it.
difficult when you're trying to sell yourself. Is there anything worse than having to write a cover letter? I think a CV is, I don't know if I'd use it for a CV. You can kind of come up with your own bullet points. But a cover letter, you really have to sell yourself. So I think that's a difficult one. Again, remembering that it's the prompt that you're using that is key here. It's that I want to say I have this skill, I have this many years experience. You really have to feed it the information, but it will give you back a really decent example of a cover letter. And again, it's a starting point.
It's really interesting as well to see how ChatGPT embellishes your own experience and your own skills and sells it up. Because we all do that for our CVs anyway and our cover letters. We are the greatest thing in productivity since productivity was invented. And the eloquent way sometimes that ChatGPT does that is quite interesting. Outside of work, recipes.
I love this one. There is supermarkets who do this, and it's not the most fantastic system where basically you go into the fridge and you're thinking, is there anything I could make for dinner with the stuff that I already have? I don't want to go to the shop. Is there something that I can use? You can key into Chat GPT exactly what you have, and it will give you a recipe. Now, caveat, if you have a shocking list of ingredients, it's going to recommend that you don't use it. Like, I think we tried with a block of Parmesan and a can of Coke.
I'll give you a specific example. So last night we were all messing around on the group WhatsApp in terms of comparing fridges and recipes. And I took a quick look in my fridge, and this is what I wrote into it. I said, write me a recipe that includes the following ingredients: sliced cheddar cheese, tomatoes, pesto, smoked diced ham, pasta sheets, and mushrooms. It immediately came back to me with the following. Here's a recipe for a delicious pasta dish using the ingredients you mentioned. We call it cheesy pesto pasta with smoked ham and mushrooms. And it gave me bullet points for the ingredients and how much I should use. It then gave me a 9-point instruction from preheating the oven to 375 degrees to the final point, which is removed from the oven and let cool for a few minutes. And it looked pretty good. I didn't cook it because it was 11 o'clock at night. And to your second point, one of the correspondents, our sound engineer, Gavin Hennessy, came back and said, try this one. I just had a look in my fridge. Half a block of Parmesan, half a cup of curry sauce, some oat milk, and a can of Coke. And it came back and said, we're sorry, we can't recommend any recipes with that. I'd say there is a recipe to be done there, Gav. But unfortunately,
I wouldn't say it would be edible on the other side.
Yeah, it was beyond ChatGPT's. Now, another one which is potentially useful and alternative to services out there, translations.
Oh, yeah.
So you can get this to translate an awful lot of stuff, and in a different way to common services like Google Translate. What ChatGPT really brings to the game here is flexibility, the ability to do things at scale, a lot of different things at the same time, and then give you phonetics. So an example I used was I typed in a paragraph and I said, translate this set of safety guidelines into French, Spanish, Russian, and Mandarin. And it immediately came back to me with 4 different paragraphs in those 4 languages. Just to see, I had a follow-on prompt where I told it to show me how to pronounce each version phonetically as an English speaker. And it did so. I mean, I speak French fairly well. The French was absolutely spot on. I've no idea whether the Mandarin was correct or not.
The only thing I would say about the limitations of using this in translation is that I would use Google Translate, for example, when I'm abroad. And if you are standing in that French bakery and you want to order your chocolate croissant and a coffee, and you have no idea, if I keyed that into ChatGPT and asked it for it phonetically, you're going to take a few minutes to try and figure out what that would sound like. Whereas with Google, you can just hit a button and it'll play it out to you as if it sounds.
Where's the fun in that? You're in a French bakery.
Right, but still, I think it'll be more useful again when ChatGPT is able to maybe speak it to us and help us sound it. I mean, where's the fun in that? There is no fun in panicking when you're in the middle of a shop and you need a different language.
Yeah.
But if you're using larger text, if you need to translate larger text in work, there might be safety regulations or whatever you need. You can get it like you did in 4 different languages, and it's pretty good.
So let's hope, in other words, that OpenAI don't pause their development for 6 months in case we don't get that feature. Now, there's a couple of things we talked about. We said that you need to know the limitations of ChatGPT, and we mentioned a few of them. 2021 is the general cutoff point for its information. It won't generally go into the internet to look for things. There's another thing, though. It actually gets a fair amount of factual data wrong. Okay. Now, I have found that with some of the examples I have put into it. For example, I've asked it to write me a biography of well-known people, okay? And factually, it has come back with incorrect details. I've asked it to write me a biography of not very well-known people. So I asked it, write me a 200-word biography of the journalist Adrian Weckler, and it got about half the details wrong.
Okay.
Now, that was kind of worrying. So it's caveat emptor big time there.
It does say that at the beginning when you open up ChatGPT, limitations may occasionally generate incorrect information. But I think the examples that we've given, if you're giving it the information that you want used, you're golden.
We haven't really had time, and it wasn't our purpose here to get into things like computer coding, in which is arguably ChatGPT's most productive single use. If you talk to anyone in the developer community, it's very, very good at that. But in summary, this is actually a really, really useful tool, and I would urge anyone who hasn't tinkered around with it yet, go into it and play around. And
think about where it would fit into your work.
Use some of the examples that we have given you. chat.openai.com. Create your free account and mess around with it. And hopefully, in a couple of months' time, you will have some fantastic new stuff to share with us all. If you have any feedback on this episode, if you have any examples yourself, if you've had any issue with anything that we've said, please do let us know. But from Tabitha Monahan, who was with me here today and produced this episode, from Gavin Hennessy with the dodgy fridge on sound, Conan Doherty on video, and myself, Adrian Weckler. This has been the Big Tech Show in association with Square, and we'll talk to you at the same time next week. Bye-bye.